Hello and thanks for tuning in. My name is Zach, and on this channel I mostly review science fiction and fantasy books, but from time to time and once a week, like today's show, I do take the time to talk about my other interests like comics, manga, TV, and movies, to talk about the other genres of media that I am interested in and consuming. But to keep things on track with books, I'm going to start this weekly segment of the vlog/yap session on what I have been reading and read this past week. So this week was a week to finish two books actually, and the first one was the long-running book that I've been reading, and that is Malazan, Book of the Fallen, number 2, Deadhouse Gates. So my quick, maybe spoiler-free-ish mini review is that I actually didn't like it as much as Gardens of the Moon, but I think it was definitely as good as Gardens of the Moon. So a lot of people, when I looked at this online, they say, yes, book 2 or book 3 is when you really get into Malazan, when the story really grips you. And I see a lot of people posting about their very strong reaction to the Chain of Dogs storyline in Deadhouse Gates. So maybe it's just the type of book that I'm reading, or I should say what I'm looking for in a fantasy book, but the Chain of Dogs wasn't that impactful for me. Yes, I totally understand why it would be for other people, but I love the world building that we saw in book 2. I loved all the hints of the Talani Mass, of what the Warrens are, the gods interfering with the mortals. I like Kalarm's journey, like as he's trying to apparently assassinate the queen of Malazan, and that whole how the previous king ascended. I love the world building so much in the story. I loved every time like a magic spirit or monster manifested, when they had to use magic to fight, when they opened the Warrens, when the gods revealed themselves and they gave hints of what was going on. When, all the other side POVs that happened, it was crazy. There's so much going on. I really didn't get what was even happening probably until, like the 75% part. I was just totally lost. I mean, I was following the Chain of Dogs, what was happening with this. It's like a war band of people and refugees that is written like they're a person almost. It was a very interesting writing style by Erikson, but the final moments and when we see the resolution of that sort of plot line, it didn't have that big of an impact on me. It was maybe cathartic to read it and to finish that storyline, but I was just drawn into the world still. So it's all to say that I love Malazan. I am really getting into the world. I referred to the wiki after every single chapter just to keep my head where all these plot points were going. So I was avidly consuming Malazan content. I really do love Malazan, as now finishing book 2. But the Chain of Dogs, it wasn't as impactful as maybe internet hyped up to be, but it was still a great story. Deadhouse Gates was a great book, well worth my time, and I've already purchased on Audible Memories of Ice. I'm ready to get on to book 3 of Malazan, but I've got a bunch of library holds to get to first in my priority queue. But to talk about the other second book that I finished this week, that was a nonfiction book, and we were reading this as part of our mini book club to talk about on another podcast channel I do with my friend and classmate Patricia, and that is The Data Detective: 10 Easy Rules to Make Sense of Statistics. So this was a very interesting book written from someone on the editorial board for The Economist. So it's written, by the editorial board for the Financial Times, and their author is an economist. So it's about statistics and from an economist perspective. So it's really, I guess, to say it in maybe a condensed one sentence, it's how to think critically about numbers that you're presented. Oh my God, my eye. So brief pause as I had something totally in my eye like an eyelash, but the book boils down to how to think critically about numbers you're presented, and from a writer, how the media can bias what they're showing, how they can fudge numbers, how even visualizations can be used to hide or present certain things, because we as readers, as humans, have an emotional response to seeing numbers. We have inherent bias. So it's really a book about just 10 rules to think critically about kind of any kind of reporting, but specifically to numbers, which, as the book lays out, we inherently tend to believe. We believe things stronger when they're presented as numbers, when they're presented as maps. We have a bias to take that as sources of truth. So it was a very interesting book and kind of enlightening to, think about not just how I perceive numbers, but as someone in a data role, it maybe is like the wrong takeaway, but I thought, okay, how can I use this to my advantage and maybe present numbers to tell the data story that I want? How can I use this bias to numbers to maybe highlight certain sections on a dashboard to present a particular data point and how that would obscure other things? But I guess the good guy, the angel and devil on your shoulder, the good guy would say, make sure I explain my source as they tell you in this book. Make sure it is reproducible, that everything is justified to kind of show where your calculations came from. And of course, when I'm doing this at work, I always have kind of a data dictionary in the table. So the people reading the dashboard can understand my methodology and where the data come from. So I hope I'm doing some of the best practice stuff. But yes, I thought The Data Detective was a short and very good read. It was only about 6 or 8 hours on the audiobook, so a really good read. And do check out our podcast with Patricia, where we are going to do a book club discussion all about data and this book. So then, yes, what I am reading. So now that I finished Deadhouse Gates and The Data Detective, I've got, unfortunately, a bunch of library holds from Libby, and those are 2 that I've been waiting for forever, so I feel like I have to read them because I've waited so long for that Libby hold. The first is by, I'm going to check my notes, Cory, Doctorow, and that is Enshittification. This is a book that I saw on, honestly, a New York Times article about the enshittification of the internet. You've probably heard this word. It was one of those buzzwords of the year when, especially with AI slop, that the internet is just getting worse. It's becoming a worse place. And just reading through the prologue so far, it's kind of how internet websites have grown and then take advantage of the users, and now they're kind of wrestling back control. And I liked one of the early chapters when he mentioned how the early promise of the internet was the promise that anything was possible. It was the democratization of companies, that instead of 1 or 2, megalith corporations like I guess traditional broadcasters, you have like your ABC, NBC, CBS. No, the internet was going to allow all of us to be our own personality, our own source of truth. But as we've seen lately, that promise of an open internet and everyone having their own voice has kind of condensed back down to only 1 or 2 sources, and they've consolidated a lot of, I guess you could say, power of or voice of the internet, and we're back to the kind of very similar as we had before, just 1 or 2, 3 mega companies. No, long gone are the small retailers. It's all consumed by Amazon, though of course there is a bit of backlash now to Amazon to go back to small retailers, but it's that consolidation of services on the internet. So it's a very interesting topic, and another nonfiction book that I was looking forward to. But to keep it on genre, on task for me, yes, I did get a sci-fi hold that I've been waiting for, and that is book 1 of Sun Eater, and that is Empire of Silence by, make sure I say the name right, Christopher Ruocchio, because yes, another book I've seen on Reddit mentioned all the time, parallels to a lot of books that I read and loved. I heard it mirrors Dune a bit, and reading the first couple chapters, it seems to be a feudal society in space with a young male protagonist. And even in like chapter 2, they start dueling with shields just like in Dune. So not saying that's a bad thing. I'm enjoying the story so far. It has a lot of parallels, like the family in this feudal space society is mining a resource. It's not spice, but it's like uranium. I think it's some atomic, metal or element, I guess you could say. And it seems interesting, and yes, I've seen all the hype for the later books. I know this becomes a really great series, or so I've read, so I'm keeping an open mind, and I am excited to read the Sun Eater series and to finish up the first book, Empire of Silence. So that's 2 books are on my docket for this coming week. and then to switch genres of what else we've been watching and consuming in other genres of media. Maybe to quick talk about also written word or drawn word. The manga I'm currently reading Attack on Titan. I'm up to volume 3 of the manga, so really interesting to reread it, having watched the anime ages ago, but I just started casually reading, a chapter here, chapter there of Attack on Titan to just experience one of the classics. I was in kind of a comic/manga rut. But to talk about later, yes, I'm trying to find a comic because this weekend was Comic-Con, which I'll talk about after I talk about movies, which is the next segment of talking about what we watched this past weekend, even though we had Comic-Con all day on Saturday. So 3 movies to talk about this week of our normal genres, which are varied tastes. The first one is Mieruko-chan. This is a new 2025 movie out of Japan, based on a anime and a manga. It was listed in the genre on Letterboxd as a horror comedy, but I guess it doesn't have a category for that on Letterboxd. It's more of a high school horror, but I guess it's a lighthearted one. This is not a jump scare horror, but it deals with the plot is a high school girl can see ghosts, and she basically tries to solve the mystery of these ghostly possessions at her high school. So if you've seen, yes, a very common trope or genre for comics or manga and anime is high school setting. So this is a high school setting, high school girls investigating ghosts and possessions with a little bit of a lighthearted take. So it was easy breezy watching. I guess it had a little bit of the comedic elements, but yeah, I guess a horror comedy is a proper classification because you don't want to give the vibe that this is like a straight up horror jump scare, kind of Japanese horror film. This is more schoolgirls, bright colors, a little bit of jokes, high school setting. There's a school festival as you would expect from a high school story arc. So overall a decent movie, and it was a lighthearted watch for the weekend. And then next up was a rewatch of Angels and Demons. So having recently read and reviewed on the channel The Secret of Secrets by Dan Brown, one of the Robert Langdon series of stories, we rewatched the original pre-Da Vinci Code, which is Angels and Demons. And it was a movie, it came out 2009, so barely remember the plot line, just in vague, broad strokes. So it was a rewatch, and just to kind of see that Robert Langdon origins again. I guess the one thing it reminded me most of, which is of course a recent movie we watched, which was Conclave. So I kind of totally forgot the whole, narrative structure. I remembered it happened at the Vatican, but I forgot that it was actually during a conclave, during the election of a new pope. That was one of the driving elements of Angels and Demons. So it was interesting to, compare that to the movie Conclave, which was a more serious take on the politicking and the power struggles of papal voting by the cardinals. So with that knowledge of kind of the process, but seeing this through the Robert Langdon thriller mystery lens, it was a good parallel, good refresher. But of course, I guess it had maybe the tropes of the genre where Robert Langdon is investigating these symbols, and he's noticing that the statues are pointing a certain way, and it's conveniently leading right to the next clue. And why did the killer that he's searching for place things in such a way that Robert Langdon could decode it? I guess that's with all these murder mystery thrillers, it's okay. The bad guy, the antagonist, just wants to have fun. He wants to see if he can outwit the hero, but at the same time, like, why are you giving him these clues? Why do you want him to catch you? But I guess that's the way as viewers, we're supposed to think. Yeah, that's I guess how the mind of the killer works. He sort of wants to get caught, I guess. But yeah, some of the puzzles, while interesting and cool, were a little bit, okay, really? That's convenient there that Robert Langdon can discover this centuries-old mystery and is leading him right to the next clue for our killer. And the killer is following the script exactly because the killer apparently knows all these puzzles that Robert Langdon is solving. But anyways, it's Tom Hanks running around the Vatican, solving murders and stopping the murder during the conclave. And then lastly, the movie we watched, which was another 2025 movie and probably the weakest movie we saw this weekend, if Angels and Demons would be good by comparison, and that is New Fight Back to School, New Order. And this is a reboot of the classic Stephen Chow Fight Back to School, but trying to, I guess, update to modern sensibilities. It was honestly pretty funny. There were a couple laugh out loud gags, but it was not, I guess, nonstop gags. And the thing holding the movie back was the flimsy plot. At least in the original Fight Back to School, you had Stephen Chow, that very physical humor where, yeah, it just works. Maybe it's the old style of Hong Kong movies, but this new mainland produced Chinese movie, it's trying to update for modern times. I guess, yeah, you can't maybe do all the jokes you could in the originals, but it was funny. But the plot, he's trying to find this one of the teachers with a mole, so he's while also playing an undercover cop. And sometimes the plot just got convoluted. It tried to get like almost serious at the end when it's just lean into the humor, the slapstick, which is what I was hoping. So it didn't quite work plot wise. It was a little bit of a groaner of a plot, but yes, there were some laugh out loud funny moments for our main character as he gets into these wacky situations as a substitute teacher for his ex-wife because he faked his own death, and now she thinks she knows it's his husband, but he's planning not to be her husband. He's trying to investigate the other female teachers to find their birthmark, because the person with the birthmark is the boss's wife, and he's also the gang boss. And there's just so much going on. It was a weird movie. It was not weird, but just weird. All these plot elements trying to mash together to make a comedy. But that was New Fight Back to School, New Order from 2025. And then lastly, to wrap this media segment up, what other media, not really media, but live action, IRL, AFK content I was consuming was, yes, this past Saturday was New York Comic-Con. Well, I guess all weekend was Comic-Con, but we had passes to the Saturday event, so I'll maybe put up some photos here. My son and I went to Comic-Con on Saturday, as is tradition. We usually go on the Saturday because that's the big day, but almost considering going on another day now, because by the time we get there on Saturday, so much is sold out. It's so packed, but the counterpoint is that's the fun part. We really enjoyed the vibes. I loved being there around all the like-minded people. Everyone's just good vibes all around. Maybe New York City has a bit of a, stigma that everyone's, doing their own thing. Everyone's sort of cranky, but all New Yorkers in general do come together, and especially at Comic-Con, you get everyone, in the same spot together around their fandom. So everyone's having a good time, looking out for each other. Everyone, we dressed up in our costumes. We cosplayed. My son 3D printed his. I tried out EVA foam for the first time just to do a simple Thor pattern. Had a lot of fun building it. Learned a lot. I feel like next year I will be hopefully an even better pattern maker. I learned a lot about patterning. I apparently, scaled up a little too much, and I need to work on, patterning before I start cutting my EVA foam and assembling it. I learned a bit about assembling and cutting, but a lot to improve on for next year, and trying to think about what to make next year. But where I was going, yes, that walking around in costume was great, because you're walking the show floor, you're seeing all these other amazing cosplays. Everyone just is there for a good time to enjoy their own fandom in their own way, whether it's comics, whether it's manga, whether it's movies, whether it's toys, whether it's trading card games. There's just so many different people all about their fandom together in one place in the Javits Center in New York. So lots of great stuff. A couple observations, I guess, about Comic-Con this year is maybe where my mind was, but I noticed a lot more books sellers this year. So, and specifically the genre of books was not the stereotypical sci-fi fantasy, which you would associate with kind of nerdy geeks like when I was growing up way back when in like the 90s. No, now it's all romantasy, young adult. I stopped by all the tables for like Tor and Blackstone Publishing, Penguin Random House, I swung by all their tables. I browsed the physical books, even though I'm mostly an audiobook listener, and most of the sections, which makes sense because that's the number one selling genre of books right now, is that romantasy, young adult sort of literature. There was giant signs for Alchemized, for all of the Onyx Fourth Wing series. Every kind of author there was kind of in that genre, so it didn't really find any new hidden gems for me. Every table had a little bit, they had a couple physical copies of a, fantasy series. I saw the new Ken Liu book. I saw the Witcher series was being promoted. Matt Dinneman from Dungeon Crawler Carl was there signing. George R. R. Martin was there, I guess, every year, but the majority of author talks were, I guess the new style of YA/light romance or full-on romantasy author. So not a whole lot of events that I was interested in going to. I remember, was it 3 years ago, Brandon Sanderson was there. I didn't wait in that super long line, but that was when I was first getting back into Sanderson. That's where one of the prints, I guess I moved on the wall up here on the top. I got a Stormlight Archive print from the Stormlight Archive booth for Sanderson's visit there, and I got a shirt from Sanderson from the Stormlight Archive. But this year was just a noticeable, I feel like, romantasy, young adult, and less on the hardcore nerdy fantasy sci-fi side. But also I noticed a lot of anime and manga was definitely present, maybe because I haven't been reading a lot of comics. I usually only read Marvel. I didn't see as much from the, I guess, comic side, but I think that's more my worldview, where I'm pretty much stick to one publisher for comics. I'm not really looking for independent comics, but I do read kind of a bunch of different publishers for manga or books, so I'm, I guess, more varied in taste in those genres. But for comics, I usually just read Marvel through Marvel Unlimited, so I guess I'm kind of narrow focused on comics. So when I was browsing the floor, I didn't really see that much from other, I guess, comic vendors and stuff. But Artist Alley was great. We went down to Artist Alley as usual every year and tried to find some artwork for the office, for the house. Got these prints up here, like a K-pop Demon Hunters, a Dandadan, and then my son got stuff for his room. Then we went to the Mappa booth, which had a whole Chainsaw Man the movie exhibition. We saw the Crunchyroll booth. They had a Gachiakuta experience where you dug through trash and got like a pin as a reward. So a lot of cool experiences, a lot of great booths to see. Again, upcoming anime. They had a Togen Anki, which we tried and didn't really love, about like these blood battling demons and demon hunters. But the Togen Anki had a whole big booth with Pony Canyon over in the corner. But a lot of great booths, a lot of good vibes. Great experience as usual, and excited for next year in Comic-Con and trying to figure out what else I'm going to cosplay as, maybe get a little more ambitious with EVA foam now that I've gotten a little bit experience with building and cutting EVA foam, to try something maybe a little more complex. So that's what we've been up to this weekend. Actually, I guess didn't really watch any TV series now I think about it. Usually I've been talking about Alien Earth, but Alien Earth is done, and we've just been catching up, I guess, on anime and waiting for the latest. I guess we started My Hero Academia final season, so excited to see that animated because, yes, I read the manga through the end of My Hero Academia, and looking forward to these final battles in MHA and One Punch Man Season 3. So excited to finally watch One Punch Man Season 3 and see the monster arc and see everything there, even though here on Monday I've heard the reviews are pretty bad for the animation quality for Season 3, but I'm going to reserve judgments and keep an open eye because, yes, I love the manga for One Punch Man, and I'm just excited to see it on screen. So thanks for watching this extended Gap Session vlog about what I've been reading, what I've been watching, and then, yes, my New York Comic Con 2025 experience. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.